Have you ever wondered why, even though you see deeper than most people, there are still moments when you feel like your own most ruthless enemy? In the daylight, your analysis is sharp. Others admire your intellect. But when night falls, the same mind turns into a blade, replaying small mistakes over and over like a film stuck on a loop. You achieve something, yet instead of savoring it, you hear a voice whisper inside, "You're still not enough. You missed it. You're weak." Deep thinkers often believe their battle is with the outside world. But the truth is, the most dangerous enemy stands just behind them, their own shadow. Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress, deny, but never erase. It magnifies fear, distorts your self-image, and the more you crave the light, the longer the shadow grows. Deep thinkers, because they seek perfection, because they illuminate others, often carry heavier shadows than most. It drives you to question yourself until exhaustion, to believe your flaws are your true essence. But Jung would whisper another truth. The shadow does not come to destroy you. It comes to remind you to look back. This video will not teach you to eliminate the darkness, because that is impossible. It will guide you through it, so you can see that within the very things you call imperfections may lie the source of strength you have never yet touched. The shadow of deep thinkers is not something you can easily spot. It doesn't appear as a terrifying figure, but slips quietly into your everyday habits. You call it perfectionism, but in truth, it is a subtle form of self-condemnation. You write a page of notes, then tear it up because the handwriting doesn't look neat enough. You finish a task, but instead of breathing with relief, you immediately think of 10 ways you could have done it better. The shadow whispers in your mind, turning each achievement into proof that you are still not enough. Another symptom is how your sharpness turns against you. Deep thinkers are skilled at analyzing every detail in the world around them, but when alone, the same blade cuts inward. You recall a conversation and replay every word, every expression, questioning whether you said the wrong thing, whether the other person now thinks less of you. No one blames you, but you still prosecute yourself as if guilty. Sometimes the shadow appears in moments when you should feel joy. You achieve what others dream of, but before happiness can even spread, a worry intrudes. What if I fail next time? What if this was just luck? And so instead of savoring success, you live in constant tension, as if every accomplishment is a fragile bridge about to collapse. What deepens the pain is the feeling that you cannot share it. You hesitate to tell others for fear of being dismissed as overthinking. So you stay silent, giving the shadow even more room to grow. Jung once reminded us that what we deny will return to govern us. And deep thinkers, precisely because they strive for mastery over themselves, often become trapped in a self-made loop. The more they seek clarity, the more the shadow stretches long. This is not just insecurity. It is an unconscious mechanism quietly eroding you from within. You are not lonely because of a lack of people, but because you live with a shadow that has never been named. And if you refuse to face it, you will continue letting that shadow define the whole of who you are. CarlJung emphasized that the shadow is not something foreign, but the other half of every human being. The part that is repressed, denied, yet silently alive. For deep thinkers, the irony is that they are often more dominated by their shadows. Why? Because the very ability to see too much makes them accustomed to illuminating the world, while forgetting that the brighter the light, the longer the shadow it casts. Imagine this. You analyze sharply every detail. You notice what others overlook. But that same gift makes you unforgiving toward yourself. You believe that knowing more must mean living better. And when you make a mistake, The shadow immediately magnifies it into proof that you are unworthy. Where others see a small flaw, you see a full internal sentence. Jung called this phenomenon identification with the persona. When you cling too tightly to the image you want to show the world, the hidden side grows stronger. Deep thinkers often carry the illusion that they can control everything with reason, but the unconscious does not obey reason. Repressed emotions, anger, envy, fear, do not disappear. They wait for their chance to surface. And for those who idealize themselves too much, the shadow becomes even more ferocious. It shows up in sleepless nights, in the moments you shrink yourself, in the disorientation you feel even at the edge of success. How do you begin to recognize it? Jung would not advise you to fight the darkness because the more you resist, the stronger it becomes. He would tell you to observe the moments when you overreact, when you feel irrational discomfort, when the inner voice judges harshly. Each extreme reaction is where the shadow reveals itself. When you find yourself furious at a small piece of feedback or saddened for no clear reason, do not rush to dismiss it. Ask instead, is this really me, or is this the rejected part of me speaking? What Jung wanted to remind us is this: the darkness does not define you, but it is a part of you that must be brought into awareness. Deep thinkers only become truly free when they dare to turn back and face the shadow that has followed them all along. Because only when you realize, the shadow is not the enemy, it is the unheard part of me, will you stop letting it dictate the image you hold of yourself. The unconscious mechanism that makes deep thinkers so easily ruled by their own shadow begins with something that looks harmless: the desire to be perfect. Deep thinkers often grow up with the feeling of being different from their peers. They observe more deeply, they feel more sensitively, and they quickly learn that such qualities are not always welcomed. A child who asks questions beyond their years is brushed off or labeled too complicated. And so, from early on, a silent message takes root. There are parts of me I should never show. That hidden part becomes the seed of the shadow. From there, a loop is set in motion. The more you crave recognition, the more you present your brighter face. Logic, analysis, refinement. But at the same time, you deny what doesn't fit that image. Anger, envy, weakness, even the simple need to be comforted. The unconscious does not discard these pieces. It stores them. And eventually the forgotten parts return, demanding presence, through sleepless nights, sudden anxieties, or self-sabotage at the very moments when life is going well. Deep thinkers often misunderstand, believing that if they just control harder, think a little more, they can escape. But Jung believed it is precisely the effort to control everything that empowers the shadow. The more you dig for solutions, the more you encounter layer upon layer of unanswerable questions. It feels like being trapped in a maze of your own intellect. The further you walk, the more lost you become. The danger lies in how this loop feeds itself. You realize you are overthinking. You blame yourself for being weak. The self-blame becomes fuel for the shadow to grow larger. The shadow is cunning because it uses the very tool you are most proud of, your analytical mind, against you. It whispers, if you were truly intelligent, you wouldn't be like this. And you believe it, because that voice sounds so familiar, echoing the words of parents, teachers, or society that once pressed themselves into you. Yet here also lies the potential breaking point. Jung declared, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This means that the moment you pause and admit, I am being led by my shadow, you reclaim a measure of power from it. You don't need to reconcile everything at once. You only need to name it. When you catch yourself in self-criticism, try saying softly, "This is not the whole of me. This is the shadow whispering." By pulling it into the light of awareness, you break the unconscious loop. And if you stay until the end of this journey, you will grasp a truth that most deep thinkers miss. The shadow never truly wanted to destroy you. It only wanted a place to stand. And when you learn to face it instead of avoiding it, you transform the darkness from a prison into an ally. Imagine you are standing before a large mirror, the light behind you pouring forward. In the reflection, there is not only you, but also a shadow that stretches long and dark, and sometimes even looks larger than your real body. You know that shape is not you, yet you cannot deny that it is present. For deep thinkers, this is a familiar experience. The stronger the light, the longer the shadow. The more you crave clarity and pursue truth, the more the shadow clings. It magnifies fear and turns small doubts into towering figures. This mirror does not only reflect the outer form, it also exposes inner truth. When you look, you see two versions of yourself, one sharp and intelligent and assured, and another that trembles and questions and is never satisfied. The problem is that deep thinkers often allow others to see only one half, the bright face in the glass, while the shadow is denied and left to swell every time you examine yourself under the harsh beam of reason. This image explains why deep thinkers so often grow exhausted in silence. You think you are in control, yet you spend your life trying to stand in the exact place where the shadow will not overtake you. The more you avoid it, the more the shadow returns, darker and longer and more distorted. That is the nature of the Jungian shadow. It does not disappear. It only changes shape according to how you treat it. So what should you do in front of this mirror? The answer is neither to turn your back nor to try to erase the dark. It is simply to stop and study both images, to acknowledge with honesty, "Yes, this is the part I did not want to see." When you do this, the shadow becomes less frightening. It turns from a sentence into a signal. Deep thinkers often feel lonely because they believe they alone must face a shadow. But in truth, everyone has one. The difference is that you dare to look at it more clearly than others, and this courage can transform you from someone pressed down by the shadow into someone who knows how to walk beside it. In that mirror, the shadow is not only a force that pulls you down, it is also a reminder that your light is strong enough to cast a reflection. If you truly look straight at your own life, you will notice that the shadow has spoken many times. Remember the moment you had just finished something important and someone praised you? But instead of smiling, you heard a cold voice inside say it was only luck. That is not humility. It is the shadow choking your joy. Or when you were about to begin a new project, and rather than excitement, you heard it whisper, "You will abandon it anyway." Don't delude yourself. And suddenly you hesitated before even starting. Deep thinkers are especially vulnerable to this loop because they analyze every detail. A stray comment from someone can haunt you for an entire week. You lie awake dissecting glances and pauses in a conversation until you reach the harshest conclusion that they must look down on you. The shadow does not need allies. It only borrows your own intelligence to construct thousands of self-accusatory scenarios. The consequences are already familiar to you. Exhaustion that never lifts. The sense of never being good enough, trust in yourself slowly corroded day by day. Soon you begin to doubt even the obvious, the love of those close to you, the value of your work, the meaning of your effort. And when doubt becomes habit, you end up living in a distorted reality where the shadow always wins. Jung warned that if the shadow is not recognized, it will continue to rule you from the depths of the unconscious. You think you are choosing, but in truth you are only reacting to a script the shadow has written for you. Self-sabotage, procrastination, avoidance, or shrinking yourself so you never have to face risk. The painful truth that must be admitted is this: many times you are not rejected by the world at all. You are stopped by the shadow inside your head. And if you do not dare to face it directly, you will go on living as a diluted version of yourself while the strongest potential within you remains imprisoned. You are used to seeing the shadow as an enemy, but pause for a moment and ask yourself, what if it was never here to destroy you? Jung believed the shadow does not form by accident. It is the part of you left behind because it did not fit the image you wanted to keep. So it returns not to break you apart, but to demand to be seen. And the first step is to change the way you name it. When you whisper to yourself, "I am useless," try replacing it with, "This is fear asking for space." When you scold yourself, "I am weak," shift it into, "This is the part I have not yet learned to care for." The language you use will decide whether you turn the shadow into a prison or into a mirror. Deep thinkers often assume that light is the goal and darkness merely an obstacle. But Jung said otherwise. You cannot have light without shadow. The more you want clarity, the more you must know how long the shadow falls. And this is the reframing. The shadow does not make you wrong. It makes you whole. Without it, you are only a mannequin of light, half a person. When you dare to bring the shadow into awareness, you begin to touch real strength. The strength of someone who knows both sides and is no longer blindsided by what was once denied. Remember the last time you overreacted in anger or felt sadness for no reason, before you would judge yourself as too unstable. But with new language you can say, "This is the shadow knocking at the door." And in that moment, instead of repressing, you sit and observe. You write it down, or speak it softly. By this small act, you transform an unconscious outburst into a conscious dialogue. And in that dialogue, the shadow begins to lose its absolute power. The warning here is simple. If you keep avoiding the shadow, it only grows larger and returns more violently. But when you face it, you discover a paradox. The shadow also carries what you need: decisiveness, vitality, creativity. Many deep thinkers only allow themselves to be gentle, rational, calm analysts. But the shadow, the part that contains anger and instinct, is the very reservoir that gives them the power to act. When you integrate it, you stop merely thinking. You start living. The greatest reframe Jung wanted us to hold on to is this: you are not broken. You are simply not yet whole. The shadow is not proof that you are worse than others. It is evidence that there are still parts of you unopened. And every time you change your inner language, you reclaim a little ground from the dark. Step by step, you walk out of the prison not by erasing the shadow, but by learning to walk alongside it. How do you begin living with the shadow instead of letting it control you? Jung would not tell you to try to fix it. He would tell you to practice conversing with it every day. There are 3 small steps you can try right now. First, write down the voice in your head. Whenever you hear the familiar lines like, "I'm not enough," or "I'll just fail," instead of arguing with it or pushing it away, write it exactly as it sounds, so you can see it as a separate part, not the whole of who you are. Second, find a safe action that allows the shadow to speak. It could be doodling, journaling, or even whispering to yourself. The goal is not to make it vanish, but to give it a breath of air. You may be surprised to notice that once the shadow is acknowledged, its weight already feels lighter. Third, take one small act of courage. Share a piece of the truth you usually hide with someone you trust. It doesn't have to be everything, just one fragment. If they don't understand, you still have yourself. If they do listen, you will feel the shadow grow less alone. These practices do not demand you to change your whole life instantly. They are simply ways to open a small crack of light. And sometimes one crack of light is enough to stop the shadow from being your jailer and start becoming your silent companion. If you keep avoiding the shadow, the consequence will not just be sleepless nights or a few moments of self-blame. It will become the background rhythm of your entire life. Every important decision will be diminished by the hidden voice saying, "Don't try, you will fail anyway." Every opportunity that comes close will be pushed away because you believe you are unworthy. And the most dangerous part is that you will no longer recognize it as the voice of the shadow. You will think it is you. And when this identification happens, you become a prisoner without even knowing you are imprisoned. Jung once warned that when the shadow is repressed, it shows up in two ways. One is self-destruction, the other is aggression toward others. Deep thinkers who refuse to face it often fall into cycles of hurting themselves, procrastinating, abandoning, or sabotaging what they have built. Others throw their shadow outward, becoming overly critical, sarcastic, or harsh, as if trying to dump their burden onto someone else. Whichever form it takes, the result is the same. You drift away from your essence and live like the shadow of yourself. But if you have the courage to face it, the reward is just as clear. Jung believed the shadow holds immense energy, creativity, vitality, the ability to act. Those who live only in the light may think deeply but lack drive. Those who integrate the dark become whole, both profound and decisive. They no longer have to run from moments of weakness because they understand weakness is part of truth. And it is precisely that wholeness that grants them freedom. The closing philosophy Jung left is this: one does not become enlightened by pretending to be figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It is an invitation to step out of the cycle of avoidance, because in the end, the shadow was never meant to be erased. It was meant to be integrated, so that you are no longer a victim of yourself, but begin to live as a complete human being. Imagine in front of you a door left slightly ajar. No one has opened it. No one has locked it. You know clearly that behind it is not a brand new world, but the part of you you once abandoned. The part you never dared to enter. Your shadow stands there, not screaming, only waiting in silence to be seen. For years you have run from it, believing that turning away was the only way to find peace. But the truth is, peace does not come from avoidance. Peace begins when you have the courage to place your hand on the door, take a long breath and whisper, "I am ready to see." That alone is enough to stop the shadow from being a pursuer and turn it into something welcomed back. You do not need to do anything grand today. Try instead a quiet act. Write one sentence to the shadow you usually deny, or sit in silence for one night just to hear what it whispers. These small gestures are the first step toward no longer being ruled, but beginning a dialogue. And when you do, you will realize the shadow was never here to destroy you. It was only waiting behind the door for the day it could return and make you whole.